Good evening. Today's lesson is on subtracting fractions. So we've already learned how to add fractions, and subtracting is very similar. We're still going to find that common denominator. Instead of adding, though, we're going to subtract. Now, really, we don't subtract anymore. We add the opposite. Okay, so we're going to subtract once, and then I'm going to teach you that it's really adding the opposite. And we know that from working with integers. So for the first example, I like to give those real-life examples to let you know how you might use this in real life. The first one is the Eisenbergs' budget, 1/3 of their allowance on food for their puppy. I don't know if you guys have a puppy, but we're going to say you do. On their puppy, and 1/4 of their budget on new running shoes. I know, Connor, you run. Carson, maybe you want some running shoes too. And they save the rest. Good job, guys. Keep on saving. What fraction of their allowance are they saving? Okay, so they're spending 1/3 and 1/4. Okay, so first we're actually going to add. So 1/3 plus 1/4. Now to do this, we want to find that common denominator of 3 and 4, okay? And we can list those out if we need to. 3, 6, 9, 12. And 4 would be 4, 8, 12. So we can see that common denominator is going to be 12. So if I want to use 12, okay, what I'm really doing is taking a candy bar that's cut into thirds. You don't have to write this on your notes, but just for visual. If a candy bar is cut into thirds and I have one of them, and instead I decide I want my candy bar cut into 12ths, then I need to quadruple every third cut. So I'm going to make maybe 1, 2, 3. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I counted those, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now I have 12 pieces. And shaded, I have 4 of the 12. So that makes sense. When we multiply by 4 over 4, we get 4 12ths. Now here I want to triple every 4th cut. So I'm going to multiply by 3 over 3, and I get 3 12ths. So 4 12ths plus 3 12ths. And remember, this is the amount that they're spending of their allowance. So 4 12ths plus 3 12ths gives us 7 12ths spent. Okay? So 6 12ths would have been half. So they're spending a little bit more than half. Now how much then are they saving? Well, their whole would be 1, or their whole allowance, if we're talking about 12ths, would be 12 12ths. That's their full allowance. 12 12ths is 1 whole. And they've spent 7 12ths. So how much goes into savings? We find that 5 12ths goes into savings. So they're spending a little bit more than half, but that's all right. They're still saving 5 12ths of their allowance. So there's our first subtraction problem. Now, we know subtraction doesn't exist. We live in a subtraction-free zone. Well, not live, but our classrooms are subtraction-free zones. Now we're going to add the opposite, because I want you to get used to that. Anytime you see a negative, to not be scared, know that you're not subtracting, you're going to add the opposite. So, here's example number 2. Since we no longer subtract and always add the opposite, we want to do the same with fractions. So here I have 1/8 minus 2/3. So instead of subtracting, I'm going to change this to adding the opposite. So I'm really adding a negative 2/3. Now I'm still going to go through the same steps of finding that common denominator. I can't add 8 1/3. I'll get Burple, or not Burple, we decided Gurple. Making up new colors. Gurple, that was that green and that purple. We couldn't add them together. We can't have Gurple. So we need to find some common denominator. We found those tan pieces, some common denominator so that we can actually add these. Okay, so 1/8 and 2/3. I'm going to list out 8,
George Berger, please come to the office.
16, 24, 32. Alright, so there's our multiples of 8. Now my multiples of 3. 3, 6, 9, 12, that turned out 72. 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. Now I had to go pretty far out, but I see that 24 is my common denominator. Now this time, I could have just multiplied my denominators to get the common, but I don't always know that that's the one that is common. So I'm going to use 24 as my denominator. I'm going to multiply 1/8. In order to get from 8 to 24, I'm multiplying by 3 over 3. That's multiplying by 1. Doesn't change the value. So 3 times 1 is 3. So 3 24ths and 2/3. This is a negative. So I'm going to multiply 2/3 to get from 3 to 24. I need to multiply by 8 over 8. So 3 times 8 is 24. Now -2. A negative times a positive. A sad person talks to a happy person, and they both end up feeling pretty gloom. Okay? Because that negative person just puts their negativity back on that positive person. So -2 times 8, just multiply regularly, we get 16, and I know my sign is going to be negative. Okay? So now I have 3 24ths plus -16 24ths. I can add 24ths. That's legal. Okay? So I'm going to erase my multiples. Hopefully you guys wrote smaller than I did. So 3 24ths plus -16 24ths. This equals, now remember when you add integers, you take the sign of the number with the larger absolute value, so it's going to be negative. And if I have 16 holes in the sand in 3 piles, I'm going to fill 3 of those holes, but I still have 13 holes left. And so that's -13 24ths, and that is in simplest form. Alright, so that's our answer. Beautiful. Perfect. Okay. 3, checking for understanding problems. And this just says the same rules of integers apply when working with positive and negative fractions. Alright, so go ahead and pause the video, try the first one, play it, and we'll go through it together. Alright, so 2/3 minus 3/8. We no longer subtract, we add the opposite. So I'm going to change this to adding -3/8. And I found out earlier that 24 was my common denominator of 3 and 8. So I'm going to just use that again. I'm going to write it down here. So I need to multiply this by 8 over 8, and I get 16 24ths, and I need to multiply this by 3 over 3. And negative times a positive. A sad person talks to a happy person, and that negativity rubs off on the positive person. They both end up sad. So a negative times a positive is going to be negative, and 3 times 3 is 9. So now when I'm adding, so you have to know how to multiply and add, positives and negatives. When I'm adding these two numbers, take the sign of the larger number. Well, 16 is larger than -9, so I'm going to take a positive sign here, and then I find the difference. And the difference of 16 and 9 is 7. So I get +7 24ths, and that is in simplest form. Alright, try number 2, pause the video, and then play it. Alright, so problem number 2, -1/9. I no longer subtract, I'm going to add the opposite. Notice I don't ever change that first number, okay? Some of you got in some bad habits. We got to add the opposite. Okay, so I have -1/9 and a positive and a -1/4. So I really have a bunch of holes. I have a 1/9 of a hole and a 1/4 of a hole, so I'm going to have a negative number. I know my answer is going to be negative. I can tell that already. I need a common denominator. Now I'm just going to kind of roll through them in my head. 9, 18, 27. I'm not really going to get a multiple or a common factor that matches with 4. So 4, 8, 12, 16. So I'm going to go up for a really long time until I finally get to 36. So I know just from working with fractions that my common denominator is going to be 36. And I could have listed out my multiples, but that would have taken quite a while. So to get from 9 to 36, I multiplied by 4 over 4. So I have negative, because a negative times a positive is -436. Multiplied by 9 over 9, I end up with -936. So a negative and a negative, we're working further on the left of the number line, or we're just adding to our holes in the sand. We don't have any piles to fill them, so piles don't just appear, okay? I'm going to end up with a negative fraction, and just find the sum, take the sign. So the sum of 9 and 4 is 13, so I end up with -13 36, which is in simplest form. I'm good. Okay, no reducing there either. Alright, try number 3. Pause the video and then play it. Alright, I have a whole number, don't let it fool you, a whole number 6 minus -34. Okay, subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding a positive, so that actually ends up just being a simple addition problem. And 6 plus 3/4. Now, we know that a mixed number, let's say for example, 1 2/3, that's the same thing as 1 and 2/3. Okay? A mixed number is really just a whole number and a fraction. They're being added together. So 6 and 3/4 would just be 6 and 3/4. Okay? So if you worked through that problem and found common denominators, you could have put 6 over 1, and you could have done 24 6 plus 24 fourths plus 3/4 and got 27 fourths, which is equal to 6 with 3/4 left over. So hopefully you ended up with the same answer. You just did a little bit more work than here. And one last problem. Order of operations are not going away. So if you do not know your order of operations or you still get confused, most of your problems come from rushing. Let's work through this problem together. Parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide left to right, add, subtract left to right. So starting inside my parentheses, I have an exponent, so I need to do that first. And 4 squared is the same thing as 4 times 4, which gives me 16 plus 2. Bring the rest of your problem down. Okay, so now I still have my parentheses, so I still need to combine. 16 plus 2 gives me 18 divided by -3 minus 4/5. All right, now I have division and subtraction. Well, division comes before subtraction, so I'm going to do my division first. 18 divided by -3. A happy person talks to a sad person, they both end up sad, okay? And negative divided by positive is going to be negative. So it ends up being -6 minus 4/5. Well, we no longer subtract, so anytime I see subtraction, I'm going to change it to adding the opposite. So now I have -6 plus a -4/5. Now I'll show you a shortcut in a minute, but we don't know, we're going to pretend we don't know the shortcut yet. So -6, I want that into fifths. So -6 over 1, okay? I want fifths to be my common denominator. So in order to get from 1 to 5, I multiply by 5 over 5. So a negative times a positive is going to be negative, and that's going to be -30 is the same thing as -6, because -30 divided by 5 would give you -6. -4/5 stays the same. Okay, so now I have -30/5 and -4/5. -30 and -4. 30 holes, 4 holes. We just have a whole bunch of holes. So we have -34, -34/5. Okay, which is the same thing as 5. 34 can be broken into 6 groups of 5 with 4 left over. It's going to be -4/5. So do you see the connection with this original problem? -6 plus a -4/5. A negative and a negative, you just add them together and it stays negative. So remember what we talked about up here, okay? A whole number, or a mixed number, is just a whole number and a fraction. So that would just give you -6 and 4/5. So if you saw that shortcut, then fine, you can use the shortcut. But if you didn't know that, you could have found the same answer by doing it the long way, finding the common denominators and turning your improper fraction back to a mixed number. All right, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you tomorrow in class.